Welcome to the Happiness Matters podcast, where we'll explore happiness at work and show you how to coach yourself to be happier there and more successful too, no matter what.
Hi everyone and welcome. I'm Julia Seal, and today we're looking again at our toxic emotions and how they show up in our behaviours, and especially how they escalate unhealthy conflict in our relationships at home and at work. We're exploring what we can do about them, how we can actually neutralize them, and how we can use them to fuel our happiness and success. I really do mean it. So let's have some fun. This is actually the final coaching episode in this mini coaching journey that we've been on since episode 1.17. Over the last 12 episodes, we've been exploring our negative emotions from a coaching perspective, and more importantly, what we can do about them, how we can feel better, all in service of really getting to grips with where and why you're stuck in your happiness and success. Did you have a good Valentine's Day last week? Did you see any of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse showing up on this day of love? At home and affection at work? I hope not. I trust that last week's episode gave you some ideas of what to look for, what these toxic behaviors actually look like around you and in you, since none of us are perfect, are we? And also how they're showing up in the relationships around you. So how did you find contempt or criticism, blame, stonewalling, sulking, or defensiveness? And did you manage to apply any of the antidotes to them in order to neutralize the conflict? Perhaps you just tried the antidotes out in your head, and that's a great start to becoming more skillful in recognizing what is truly toxic and needs to be addressed. In this episode, we're now going to find out how and why the antidotes work by looking behind the behaviors, kind of behind the scenes to what's really going on. And I'm going to introduce the 5 afflictive emotions that lie behind the 4 horsemen, and that actually lie behind all toxic behaviors, behind all conflict, and actually behind all our negative emotions and our unhappiness. These afflictive emotions drive everything about your dissatisfaction and your unhappiness. And this week the focus is more on you, and on how these toxic behaviors show up in us and how we can coach ourselves. So what we can do about it at a very deep, profound, and effective level. Quickly before we jump in, I'm compiling a Q&A session to end the mini coaching journey on your negative emotions. Here we can go through all your queries and comments about the coaching, and then anything that you want to share, and of course anything you want me to answer. So this is your chance to clarify anything around buffering, your next level evolution, emotional intelligence, and whether, after listening to today's session, you've decided you're an emotional child. In particular, from last week's session, to please send in your examples of the 4 horsemen in your relationships so we can bring life to the coaching with some of your own situations. Please submit everything to me on our website, Happiness-Matters.coach, and look for Ask Julia in the menu. Jumping straight in to look at the emotions and feelings that are underlying these toxic behaviors, the harbingers of destructive conflict and possible broken connections with our colleagues and loved ones. And the key to working with these toxic behaviors is to look at the emotions behind them, the actual feelings that drive our behaviors. Remember, and this is key for all our coaching, that every behavior, every single thing we do, every action we take in the world, or do not take, is motivated and fueled by a feeling. So your actions and my actions toxic behaviors such as contempt, defensiveness, and blame are fueled by what we're feeling. And we need, therefore, to discover the emotions that are lying behind these behaviors. Let's do this exercise together now, and we'll do it quickly here on the podcast as an example for you. Think about yourself and when you're using any of these toxic behaviors. And this can be a hard exercise, as we often believe that we really don't use them, and everyone else does. And of course, I don't. I'm a coach. Oh, I wish. Let's be honest. Look at all your relationships at work and at home with your loved ones, your life partner, your children, your sisters or sister-in-law, your mother. Look for the gritty relationships, the ones that you feel edgy about. That's the trick, that edgy feeling. We always work with the edgy feeling in coaching. On the edge. Remember that at work, we're often a bit better behaved. Usually, we tend to be less triggered because relationships at work are less emotionally intense. But that's not always true. The relationships with our managers and colleagues can be just as fraught as our worst family relationships. Perhaps even more so, because we don't have the same love that bonds us together. These difficult relationships come everywhere with us, don't they? They join us at family dinners, they get into the shower with us, and they get into bed with us. What's behind criticism or blame for you? What feeling motivates criticism in you? What feeling is fueling your stonewalling behaviors? What about contempt in you? Remember, we are looking for what is the emotion that's coming up for you. What feeling? Not the facts of the situation. Not what happened with this other person, what they didn't do or what they did. Just what feeling is underlying your defensiveness. This is what we're working with. If you used my coaching tool from episode 1.26, How to Feel Better, you'll be familiar with this process. But try it with me here as I talk very quickly. It's on super drive. The easiest way to tap into the feeling underlying toxicity and conflict is to go inside. Go into your physical body as we're talking and thinking about that person and that situation. Now, how is it showing up in your body? How is your body feeling? What physical sensations are coming up for you? You might find things like breathlessness, constriction, a hot flush through your body. And can you put a name to what you're feeling now? Go ahead and write down some names for the label that comes up for you. What about justified, disappointed, infuriated, envious, annoyed? The coaching we've been doing since episode 1.17 has been carefully designed to help you tap into the emotions, feelings, and sensations underlying your unhelpful behaviors and helping you to hold this experience in your consciousness. If you can become aware of each of these aspects, if you get curious about how you process negative emotions, you'll be able to coach yourself through anything in your life and towards achieving anything you want. Happiness and success, for sure. Please do listen back to remind yourself of all the coaching tools and concepts that I've outlined for you so far, and enjoy them. Okay. Assuming you can now name the emotion behind these toxic behaviors for you, because we give our experience different names wherever we are. We'll all be a little different because of our upbringing, our cultures, and our language. However, behind all these behaviors are what Buddhist philosophy calls the afflictive emotions. They're like the grandmothers of all negative emotions. So what lies behind all conflict, all emotional suffering, pain, and unhappiness are these 5 afflictive emotions: anger, craving, pride, jealousy, and ignorance. I love the way my meditation teacher, Rob Nairn, explains it in a book co-authored with another teacher of mine, Choden. These 5 are not an exhaustive list, and many emotions are not included, such as fear and shame. We can think of these 5 emotions as being like the primary colors, and just as when we mix primary colors together, we get secondary colors, so when we mix the main emotions together, we get other afflicted emotional states. Rob and Choden are both from Africa, and I'm incredibly lucky to get to spend time with them. This is a fantastic book if you're interested in taking your mindfulness training to the next step of insight. So I'll link to it in the show notes for you, as well as some other books you might like to read from them. These mind poisons, the kleshas, are the destructive emotions that limit us in the world. They disconnect us from others and the full experience of interbeing, of whole being happiness, of happy and successful no matter what. Let's have a look at them to see if you can identify what's behind your negative emotions, especially the one you've just identified from your current edgy, gritty relationship or conflict situation. Ignorance actually underlies all the afflictive emotions. It's our fundamental ignorance. And the easiest way to describe this for our purposes here is that it's about our lack of self-awareness for when our minds are under the pull of anger, desire, jealousy, and greed. It's when we see the conflict and difficulties as only the other's problem caused by them and never seeing our own role and contribution. In other words, it's when we cannot see that our primal brain is reacting to the situation with a habituated reaction that might not best serve the situation. And you can pick this up in yourself by noticing what you're thinking as I'm talking. How are you justifying the conflict? And also when you're explaining a conflict situation to someone, noticing where you're assigning blame. That's ignorance. It's a very sneaky. Because we don't know what we don't know. Anger is one of the most destructive human emotions, and unlike ignorance, it's also the easiest to see. We lose our tempers, we throw adult tantrums, indulge in road rage, or shout and throw things. Also, don't forget that self-judgment and negative self-talk, like we spoke about in the self-smizing episodes, fall into this category. This is so destructive in multiple ways, so watch out for self-criticism. Even criticizing yourself for how the afflictive emotions are showing up in your life. It doesn't help your coaching to beat yourself up. Desire is about wanting something like status, wanting something in your life to be different, wanting someone to be different, or wanting to be more in control. Desire, greed, or craving is widespread. It shows up in all of us, and it shows up everywhere in our lives, even when meditating and trying to be calm and settled, instead of just experiencing the present moment, which might not be very settled and calm. That's desire and craving. The next two, jealousy and pride, are more subtle, more difficult to notice in ourselves and to confess to. I love to know who of you found jealousy, envy, or pride in our exercise. Jealousy is in action when we think that life is unfair to us and we feel like victims or inadequate. It encompasses envy and resentment and competitiveness, and they all come from a mindset of lack, of not being good enough and wanting what another has. Pride is very easy to spot in others and almost impossible to see in ourselves. Me proud? No way. And it's about feeling better than others. Being arrogant and conceited, but pretty much just, I'm a bit better than you. I know better. I do it better. So these 5 are the grandmothers of all our negative emotions and all our emotional suffering. They're not easy to look at in ourselves, are they? Which one is driving your most recent toxic behavior in your relationships? Which one is driving the conflict that you're seeing in your life? Now you know why last week I suggested you spend a week just watching what was going on around you in conflict and looking at your reactions and responses to it with as much curiosity as you could. And it feels very toxic to be here, doesn't it? These clashes are difficult to spot in ourselves. And once we spot them, and I'll say this again, please, 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 don't get sucked into judging yourself for feeling them. You're human after all. Again, I want to invite you into thinking how the afflictive emotions are showing up for you in your midlife transition. Last week we looked at the 4 horseman behaviors in the context of menopause and menopause at work. And so now you can tap into what's behind these 4 horsemen for you. The reason why menopause is such a brilliant time to be looking at toxic behaviors in and around you at work and home is that it's a massive personal growth opportunity for us. It's evolution. Our old patterns and ways of dealing with our unhappiness and of conflict don't seem to work anymore. And it's because of the physical and biochemical changes taking place in our bodies and adapting to the changing hormones of menopause, as well as the big life events that seem to happen around midlife. One of my clients described menopause as feeling like she'd been skinned alive. All her emotions now felt like they were just simmering under the surface. The negative ones. And you are raw. Sometimes we've been people pleasers, but now you're just annoyed and wish everyone would look after themselves, and your family really can't understand what's come over you. Other times we've avoided conflict in any shape or form, but now you're finding yourself more argumentative. You're tired of the same old rodeo and want things around here to change. What the call of menopause is the call of evolution, the possibility for you to evolve yourself to your next level, the next best version of yourself. It's an opportunity for change and growth, to upskill yourself in areas where you previously lacked the capability. If you've always avoided conflict, perhaps your call is to find your inner power, to strengthen your skill in standing solid in the face of others' destructive anger, thinking on your feet and turning the situation around with calm and compassion. Menopause, if you want it to be, is your opportunity to get to know yourself fully, to get to know you in anger, pride, jealousy, desire, and ignorance, and to find your inner power, your inner peace, and your wisdom. On the website Happiness-Matters.coach, please subscribe to my blog, where I focus on this amazing opportunity. Let's now look at the ways you can begin to coach yourself on your afflictive emotions. We're stopping those 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in their tracks and upskilling ourselves in dealing with contempt, stonewalling, criticism, and defensiveness. We're learning how to explore our afflictive emotions of ignorance, anger, desire, jealousy, and pride. And we're going to discover how to use the inherent wisdom in each of them to transform our most difficult emotions and conflicted relationships. We're going to do this in a 3-step process using 2 of my coaching tools. If you're really not sure where to start with this coaching, or if the conflict you're experiencing is too intense to work with on your own, and you want more than what I'm outlining in these 2 podcast episodes, you can work with me personally. You can book a 20-minute free consult session where we can talk about working together for longer, either in my 8-week coaching program, especially for difficult relationships, or in a 3 to 6 month midlife transition conversation. So you can do this right from the website, Happiness-Matters.coach. Click on the yellow button, Coach with Julia, and go straight through to my calendar to book your free session. I mentioned the first part of this step last week as a quick tip to working with yourself in the middle of conflict, and so I want to go into more detail now. Here in our coaching step 1, we want to calm your brain down and move ourselves from react mode to respond mode. This is the beginning of learning to manage your brain. Our brains are the amazing tools we have available to us, and we need to learn how to use our brains consciously, and that's what Happiness Matters is all about. So why do we want to do this? And the bigger question, how do we do this? We react to an event, a trigger, when our behaviors are automatic and instinctive. These automatic responses are linked to our very survival, the fight, flight, freeze reactions. These reactions are wired into our brains at the primal brain level. And at this level of the primitive brains, our animalistic survival instincts kick in automatically. So any event or trigger that creates negative emotions, especially the afflictive emotions, will set this automated, habituated pattern into play. When our brain picks up negative emotions, it thinks our very survival is under threat. Eons ago, we really needed the survival instinct to keep us safe from real physical harm. Fight, flight, or flee were the best actions to take for our very survival. As we grew up, our brain developed easy, habitual patterns to things that were happening to us as children that it automated to make life easier. Hiding worked if our parents were fighting. Punching worked in sibling rivalry. Not crying and helping around the house worked in times of family grief. Watching mum's moods got you chocolate cake. All of this gets laid down into our primal brain, our automatic brain, so the next time we encounter the same or similar event, we already know what to do. However, nowadays, especially in the West, our threats are very different, and we seldom are facing issues of absolute survival. In reality, our life does not depend on getting to the meeting on time, finishing that work project, finding time to exercise, or intervening in team conflict. However, your brain thinks it does, and so it goes to what it knows. It goes to those automatic habituated patterns, the fight, flight, freeze reaction, or your established childhood patterns of behavior to get what we want. And they work. A lot of the time, they really do work. And that's fine. However, once a pattern is laid down, we keep going back to it and we reinforce it, even though there might be better responses to a situation. Things we haven't yet learned what to do and certainly didn't know about when we were 5 or 6. So take conflict. If there was a lot of shouting and scary conflict in the home when you were growing up, you might have found that running away and hiding until things calmed down worked really well. So your brain learns that the best reaction to shouting conflict is to move away from it. Now you're in the world today and people shout all the time. Anger is one of the afflictive emotions, and it's everywhere. I don't have to tell you that. But running away and hiding from anger is no longer your best response. It doesn't work for marriages, and it doesn't work at work. However, unless you learn a different response and actively practice it, your brain will keep going to its automatic response. Remember, it thinks your survival is under threat and it needs to act fast to keep you safe. We're so lucky to have such an amazing primal brain, aren't we? So let's see. When the same event or trigger happens and we decide that our typical automatic reactions don't actually help us or get us the results that we want in our lives, and that a different response is required. We respond to an event or a trigger when we are using our human brains, the prefrontal cortex, and we can override our automatic reaction, our instinct, with conscious thought and decide on purpose to respond differently to what's facing us. So in going from reaction to response, we are going from primitive animal brain to complex human brain, the thinking prefrontal cortex. We are going from an unskilled automatic fight, flight, freeze reaction to a considered, deliberate, mindful choice. Now, how do we get to this point? This choice point between react and respond. You can kick off this transition from reaction to response with my coaching tool, the 3 long, strong breaths. It's simple, but it is an effective way to calm your brain down, because this is what we have to do first. Your brain meets the trigger and believes it to be a threat, and you need to calm down. It's not that easy, is it? If you haven't used my tool yet, download it from the website Happiness-Matters.coach in the fun and free section. Follow the instructions to use it whenever you notice any physical sensations in your body that might be related to an afflictive emotion running below the surface of your consciousness. The vibrational sense of being triggered, you'll know it. Things like breathlessness, churning stomach, constriction around your heart, a flash of anger, or a wash of fear. Use it as often as you can during the day. The more practice you get at this, the better, especially when you're not triggered. The tool works at both a cognitive and somatic level to shift us from being in fight, flight, or freeze mode. The breathing basically calms our brain down. It stops pumping out the stress hormones and your brain waves actually change shape. So in a nutshell, what this tool of mine can do for you is effectively change the way your brain perceives conflict. I will talk more about all of this in Series 2, which is all about brain management and the tools we can use to utilize our brains like the amazing, powerful tools they actually are, rather than being at the effect of our brains, at the automatic effect of our primal brains. What we get from the 3 long, strong breaths is a gap, a pause. This tiny gap is all your human brain needs to jump in and offer you a new, different response to your automatic reaction. It gives your brain, or your brains, the pause they need to switch over who is running the show in high conflict situations. Primal brain to human brain. Once we have this pause, this gap, you can try out my next tool. This one is a fun little gimmick I created for my clients years ago. I've used it so often with myself and in coaching others, even in large workshops with more than 100 people learning about how to manage conflict in their teams. It does involve some singing. On your part this time, not on mine. And of course, it's related to my upbringing and to Western popular culture. So if it doesn't appeal to you exactly as I present it, please find something similar in your own musical taste, your own cultural world of proverbs and sayings. Find something that works with your brain on multiple levels: sound, visual, humor. That's why it's so effective. I call it my high road, low road coaching tool. I have a graphic of it that I'll give you. You can download it from the website Happiness-Matters.coach, again from the free and fun section, or from the show notes with this podcast episode. What makes this tool effective is how it sticks in your mind and becomes available to your brain at the critical point of response. So at that pause moment, as your brain is shifting from react mode to response mode, from primal survival brain to thinking human prefrontal cortex. At this gap, you want to have an easy next step for your brain to take, something that's simple for it to recall and put into action. Create your own or use mine so that you have something to offer your brain as a response just on the edge of that automatic reaction. The tool is based on a song called The Bonnie Banks of Loch Lomond. The song is a Scottish folk song. Perhaps it's because of my Scottish roots through my mother and my grandfather. I was certainly using this tool long before I met Fraser, my Scottish husband. I have found one source that we can play thanks to Scottish musician Bob Ferguson, who has made his Scottish folk song recordings freely available. And the link to Bob's music is on YouTube and in our podcast show notes. So here's the beginning for you.
You'll take the high road, and I'll take the low road. And I'll be in Scotland afore ye. But me and my true love will never want to gae on the bonny, bonny banks on Loch Lomond.
The song comes out of the Jacobite political culture of Scotland, a movement in the 1700s to restore the House of Stuart back to the British throne. And it tells the story of a soldier dying for his king. The low road is the normal road on earth, and the high road is the road in the sky that the soldier sentenced to death will take to return to his homeland in the Highlands of Scotland. Over the years, the high road has become a phrase in English to mean the more arduous route, the more ethical option, as in taking the moral high ground. It's the choice you'll take in keeping with your highest ideals. What's useful for you is the concept that you have a choice of road to take when you're confronted by toxic behavior or you encounter your negative emotions. You can go the low road, the well-worn path of your primal brain's automatic responses, or you can go the high road, the road of your thinking brain, the road of integrity, evolution, and growth. I hope you'll enjoy experimenting with these two tools of mine and how they work together in creating and then expanding the gap between your reaction and your response. Now for the next step in step 2, we're looking at your actual response. What different responses could you take to conflict, to toxic behaviors, and even to the underlying afflictive emotions in you? In last week's episode, I shared the antidotes to the 4 horsemen toxic behaviors. These are all alternative responses, all actions that you can practice to neutralize the poisons. So there's some great examples of different responses that you can take from last week's episode. What you can also do for yourself at a profound level is start to work with what's behind the 4 horsemen showing up in you and learn to coach your afflictive emotions, the very things that are driving toxic behaviors and negative emotions in you, tackling the 4 horsemen at their source rather than just applying an antidote to neutralize them. So step 3, the way to start coaching yourself, is to ask yourself some powerful coaching questions. We want to put that clever brain of yours to work finding answers for you. Your answers to these coaching questions will give you the answer to which response is your most appropriate for the situation. Firstly, you can ask yourself to find the wisdom behind the afflictions. On the flip side of each afflictive emotion, there is a wisdom element that you can access through this breathe, pause, inquire process. You can ask yourself, for anger, what is the opportunity my anger offers me? How can loving kindness, basic friendliness, show me a different way to respond? For desire, what gift does compassion bring to my desire and craving? What about self-compassion? For jealousy, how does sympathetic joy and appreciating myself and others lead me away from jealousy? For pride and ignorance, this works for both of them. Can I find an even-mindedness in the situation here? How can I engage the world without such strong likes and dislikes? Then you can also ask yourself about power. At the root of all toxic behaviors, like the 4 horsemen, is a sense of powerlessness. And remember, all our power resides in our choices, what we choose to think, what we choose to feel, and what we choose to do out there in the world. So you could ask yourself these questions. How does moving into response mode increase my power in conflict and difficult relationships? Where does my power in the world actually come from? What does it mean to be powerful in my life? Asking yourself these positive questions is an incredibly powerful thing to do. Put the question at the top of a piece of paper and just go. You will be amazed what you find out. By tapping into your own inner power, you'll be able to access the wisdom in the afflictive emotions. And it works the other way around too. By tapping into the wisdom element, you will create your power, true internal power that is unshakable, even in the face of your out-of-control external events and toxic, poisonous conflict in your relationships at work and at home. This is your true opportunity to evolve yourself to the next level and to craft your version of happy and successful no matter what. Certainly, no matter what afflictive emotions run through your brain today. These 3 steps, from calming your brain through to asking it powerful questions, shows you the path to how to handle conflict and toxicity in a completely different way, in a way that strengthens and expands your happiness at the deepest level, your whole being happiness. We're now, my friends, at the end of the mini coaching journey on how to feel better, how to coach your negative emotions and your unhappiness. You know, I quote American Tibetan Buddhist nun Pema Chodron a lot, and I love this one by her, as it's exactly what we're talking about here. Our negativity is a powerful creative energy. It's something we can harness or master for our own growth and happiness, the equivalent of holding a bull by the horns and staring it in the eyes while having to sneeze the entire time. What we've been doing here in these last episodes is just this, harnessing our negativity for our own growth and happiness. We've been taking the bull by the horns and staring it down, finding out exactly what's getting in the way of our happiness and success. I hope you found these last 2 episodes on coaching afflictive emotions and toxic behaviors helpful. It is a huge topic, but I think we've made a great start. Poor bull, 'cause here we come. Next week is the much awaited for Q&A session on this coaching. So everything we have spoken about since episode 1.17, and it's your chance to clarify anything. Send your comments to me via the website Happiness-Matters.coach and look for Ask Julia in the menu. And my wish for you today, May you be happy. May you be free. There is no better time to do this together. Bye for now. I think I'm going to go wake everyone up by singing the Bonnie Banks of Loch Lomond. Bye.
Thanks for joining us on this Happiness Matters podcast. Do join us again here next week on Tuesday. You can subscribe to this series at Apple Podcasts on iTunes, or you can sign up for it on our website, Happiness-Matters.coach. That's Happiness-Matters.coach. COACH. Also, you can join our conversation on Facebook by following us there. Our Facebook page is also Happiness-Matters.coach.